4th Greenways Open Space Committee meeting. I'd like to call a meeting to order at 7:05, and could we please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance?
Hi, Mandy.
He's got the lowrider. Okay. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Good? Good. Well, thank you all for coming, and thank you for accommodating the change of the date from Tuesday to Wednesday. We will be back on our normal schedule of on Tuesdays, beginning with our November meeting. I will call the roll, and St. Pierre, not here. Urbani,
Here.
Weeks, Geist,
Here.
Frucci, Phillips,
Here.
Loveday, Bloetscher.
Here.
Okay. Are there any additions or deletions to the agenda as presented? And I take it all received the agenda electronically, and I put a copy into your packet. Are there no additions or deletions to the agenda? If so, I will entertain a motion to approve the agenda as presented.
So moved.
So moved by Mr. Bonney,
Second.
second by Mr. Bloetscher. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Any abstentions? We have no presentations today unless someone wants to do an impromptu presentation that we need to be aware of, but you could certainly have the floor. We will be doing some presentations, I think, in the future. Also in your packet, if you would look, we have the minutes of our September meeting. And again, I want to thank Mr. Geist for doing such a great job in taking and doing a detailed account of our meetings, and also being the secretary. So if you would take a minute or two, look over the minutes, I will then entertain a motion to approve the minutes of our September 5th meeting.
I move to approve the minutes.
Okay. Approved by Mr. Bonney. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Second by Mr. Geis. Any discussion? All those in favor of approving the minutes of our September 5th, 2023 meeting, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No abstentions, okay? The ayes have it. We do not have any action items that I'm aware of. And our first discussion item, and you'll notice I did change some of the order of our meeting here, at least to facilitate our discussion. The first thing is a discussion of our successful dump the junk, find a treasure. A little after action review here that we can talk about. First off, I do want to say thank you to all the board members who were able to participate, and I do know that congratulations were in order to Mr. Bloetscher upon the marriage of his
Right.
daughter, and we can give him a round of applause for that.
Thank you.
And Mr. Geist, I know, had the Jefferson Invitational Cross Country meet that day, but again, I can tell you, success-wise, it maybe was not up to our record-breaking example that we had last spring of 555 cars, but our gatekeeper, Scott Ryan, tallied 294 cars visited our dump the junk. We did fill 15 dumpsters to the brim, and our big discards, as it has been at least in the last several of these, have been concrete, wood, and lumber, and yard waste. So those have been what people have been disposing of. And people, I think, are still cleaning up after the ice storm that we had, and are, they're recooling some of their property that was in disrepair. We had 41 tires that were kept out of and actually, technically, we had 40 tires. One of them was an inner tube that became that the carrier that normally recycles them said, no, that goes in the trash. So I think we put it there because it was rubber, but we had 40 tires for sure on that regard. Fritz's Enterprise, again, we want to thank them for their working with the scrap metal, and we filled their bin pretty much so. And again, the treasure hunt that we have for people to come and gather and take what they would like in terms of the treasures, I think went quite well. Just a reminder too, we weren't able to coordinate this with the Cass Community Services of Detroit, and so we had a couple of angels, and I guess we can call them that, to say the least, at the end of the day, that would able to take the reusable furniture and goods to the Salvation Army, and that in and of itself was a whole nother story, I think, that we could say. And I think it was Donna DeVoe, and I was looking Jerry, I don't know Jerry's last name, okay, but they were kind of commandeered into helping us out, and they did a great job. Again, I want to thank board members Cliff St. Pierre, Mandy Phillips, Roberta Urbani, and Theresa Weeks for their help, and Scott Rind, our neighbor, John Leon, Chief John Weeks, Donna, and again, the DPS folks just always do a fabulous job organizing and coordinating this and working that day. So Donna Deppa from the DPS and the Water Department helps to get does some of the early preliminary footwork there. John Kime and Rob Proctor worked very hard that day. So anybody else have any comments who were on Dump the Junk, or maybe some things that we can do to make it better?
Well, I just wanted to make the comment that, I think changing the name to Find the Treasure, Dump the Junk is, worth discussing. And I know it was kind of funny when we were talking about it that Saturday, but I think, because for years when I heard Dump the Junk, I was so turned off by the name I never came. I mean, I just thought, what is that? I just thought, so I don't know, it might get more attention from the community, so I think it's a good twist on the name. Find a treasure, dump your junk.
Right.
Putting the positive at the beginning.
Right.
So I'm taking this big cage that was left at the Find a Treasure. I'm taking it to a wildlife rehabilitator on Friday evening. I talked to Julie Cordes and to see if our shelter needed it, and she said no, but somebody else does. So just a little note that there's always a home for these treasures.
You guys weren't there, but I can. Personally, I don't think that Dump the Junk has necessarily a negative connotation, because the idea is that we want to get it into a dumpster and not into the open space greenways or at the side of the road, or where we know we had, for example, several years ago, where there was like a debris field just off of East River, and we had, that was a dump ground. I'm not saying people on East River did it, but there was certainly it was in open space that we called the Boy Scouts to come and help clean it up, and they did a great job. So, but again, what we call it, the whole idea, we could call it something entirely different if we would like. But is the emphasis on?
Yeah, I wasn't thinking of the dumpsters.
I'm also looking at from a standpoint is, like, are we looking at what is more important? Are we more concerned about recycling perfectly good and usable materials for people to come to take free, which is what it is? Or are we more concerned about debris and concrete and wood, products like that, not going into, or not in somebody's backyard, which is an eyesore to the neighbors, or in open space? So either way, and again, when we advertise it, we can call it that, but that's, the way I look at it. I mean, any thought about that?
I think as much as anything, it's a continuing education for people to understand what the intent and purposes of it is. And that'll help also by, them understanding better, spreading by word of mouth and that. So I just think we need to make sure that we promote it well, make sure people understand what it is, and, we can call it anything we want to.
Right. Any other comments or?
I didn't realize the history behind it. I didn't know about the dumping site on East River. And also, I really didn't think about the dumpsters. I was thinking about the treasures that people find.
Yeah.
So, yeah, point well taken.
The other part to that, and Carl might be able to speak to this, it's Dump the Junk, Find a Treasure has been around almost 20 years. I think it's been around a long time.
Okay, that long.
And people do, first off, it's very popular, so knock on wood, we're very happy about that. It's not like, you get 15 dumpsters and then nobody shows up. It's a question of, it was fairly steady. As a matter of fact, we had 7 cars lined up at 8:30, okay, and even before that. So people are anxious to get it done and to deal with it. So, so what we call it is what we call it, but we can, and again, I think we're gonna look at another one in the spring. Okay, so we'll look like sometime like in May or whenever that, or late April. I mean, we gotta see how the weather is and that, but we'll try to, we're committed to having 2, at least we said that as part of our goal. So, good.
On that note, just a reminder that in the continuing vein of finding treasures, St. James Rummage Sale is happening this weekend, starting tomorrow, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. And then Saturday, October 21st, is the Wayne County Household Hazardous Waste Day. And you can look on their website to find out what is and what isn't acceptable, and that's at the Wayne County Community College on North Line in Taylor. So we're not done cleaning up our garages and stuff, or filling them up again.
Right.
Bert, what was the date on that again?
October 21st.
Yes.
Thank you.
I think from like 9 to 1, I believe.
And they take things that we were not able to take at Dump the Junk. So they take electronics and paint and stuff like that.
Yep.
Bert, what's the title again?
Wayne County Household Hazardous Waste
Okay,
Day.
household.
Good. Thanks, Bert. Very much so. Anything else on Dump the Junk?
If you guys were concerned about advertising, have you ever tried handing out flyers at Kroger so you can explain to them what it is?
I can't speak to that itself. I know we do it through GROSSE Now and the GROSSE Township website. I also know there's usually an article prior to each one in the GROSSE Grand, which, there's that kind of thing. Sometimes the issue with handing out flyers, you're killing trees, and you're, so it's like, okay, kind of, I thought you guys are supposed to be environmentally conscious. So, yeah, so I think a lot of our communicate has been word of mouth, or it has been through, but that's a good point. I mean, however we can get it out there and get it, and I think the last time when we had 555, we had all that pent-up frustration and pent-up work that people did during COVID, okay? So we were able, when we opened literally the floodgates, I mean, they came and kept coming, which was good, so.
I think if we blew up the DPS flyer that they have on the website and put that at Kroger, just as something for people to see when they're going in and out, that would probably be
Oh, make like posters or
Effective,
something
yeah.
like that. Yes, yes, that would be good. Good, thank you, Zoe. Okay, the next item on our discussion list in our agenda is the Greenways Open Space Millage. And Carl, perhaps I'll defer to you on this, and we'll talk a little bit about it. I did include in your packet so that you, if you take a look, there is a schedule of, in the back of your packet after the minutes, you had a schedule of millages as they are on the tax rolls, but also as they kind of fall off, what year on the far end, if you see that.
I believe, though, this has not been updated for the recent passages we had of the 4 renewals.
I think you are correct.
Because the ones expiring 22, we just renewed those.
Right. But this is all the document that I had at
I understand
prior
that.
to that.
Right.
Right.
I requested that this be added as a discussion item as opposed to any kind of an action item. And the purpose on that is to note that our maintenance fund, and these are going to be round numbers, is approximately $168,000. Our acquisition fund is down to approximately $20,000. The maintenance fund, given the rate of expenditure, my calculation is absent catastrophic needs, is probably enough to cover us for at least another 3 years and perhaps 4 with the amount of work that we're doing. That's the number that I've done off the cuff on a back of a sheet of paper, if you will, and maintenance is a loose term. We've used a lot of wood chips this year as a result of the DTE tree trimming and the storms that we had earlier in the year. And again, my guesstimate is we had somewhere around 100 cubic yards of wood chips that were stacked along Meridian, down just south of the Meridian Elementary School, as well as some wood chips that were placed over on the airport property for use by the Rec Commission. That was very timely. The wood chips were free. There was some cost for placement of them. And putting in 100 yards of wood chips sounds like that would cover an awful lot, but we tried to put them in so that they were a foot deep, 10 feet wide, so that we would have a good path that would last, as opposed to sprinkling chips every year and going through our service provider on that. And this was something the DPS was able to do. We also have unique opportunities, such as the bicycle pedestrian bridge over the canal on Meridian between Lowry and Ferry, where sections of that were taken down because Wayne County is reconfiguring that bridge to allow the removal of, I believe it was 5 of those bridge sections. And the consideration was we could use one of those over the drain that runs south of Manchester and would allow for an easy straight access between Meridian and East River. That is still in process, but again, there's cost involved in moving wood chips and putting the stuff down, and the maintenance fund, while we're saving money from having to have the provider come in and take care of the wood chips and things like that, we still spend thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars a year for deadfall, for trees that fall on the path, for trees that are charitably described as hangers that present a hazard to either adjoining property owners or to people using our trails. So I think a better number, I'm very conservative. I learned this from our former finance director, Ann Darsnick. You're liberal on your expenses, conservative on your income and your fund, and you generally balance without terrible headaches at the end of the year. So I'm going to say we have enough for 3 years, maybe 3+ years. The acquisition fund, however, and there's not an awful lot of property left to acquire on GROSSE for open space purposes. We recall that there were a number of properties that MBA had looked at, and Brooke had put guesstimated values on what they would be worth. We purchased 2 lots with open space funds on Meridian, just north of Horsemill and south of Keith and Owen, and used a significant amount of funds on that. but there's not an awful lot of property left, and what is fairly expensive. One of the properties was on Island Boulevard, and I think the township accepted an estimate of $138,000 for that property, and that property is still out there. So we were able to use a significant amount of money through some significant negotiation by Chairman Stevenson, and that led to the acquisition of the 2 lots. But right now, with $20,000 in acquisition, we're really not going to be able to do any purchases, regardless of how the property might enhance Greenways open space or living on Grosse-Ile or the Grosse-Ile experience. Currently, 1 mill will raise $700,000 per year. 1/10 of a mill, plus or minus, will raise $70,000. And the issue is, if we continue with the current program, maintenance is for maintenance, acquisition is for acquisition. So if we were to have a piece of property come in that made an awful lot of sense and we could get it at a reasonable price, $20,000 doesn't do you much. The property that we used, that we purchased from the Tittles, as an example, was out the door a little over $100,000 in that ballpark. That allowed us to reconnect the northeast end of the island with a bike trail that would reach to what I refer to as the spine of Grosse-Ile, where we have a bike path that runs from Meridian, separated in significant portion by the Thoroughfare Canal. So when we purchased that property and then were able to landscape that, there are a number of people that have been using it, and I recall going back there several times just to inspect it, looking at the progress, and people using the trail were absolutely and literally blown away by what we saw. And I believe we had a couple that walked by when we did the ribbon cutting, and they thought that that was just a terrific project. So when I look at maintenance and acquisition, if we were to ask for the taxpayers at some undetermined point, I'd like to sit down and have an opportunity to speak with both the township supervisor and the township manager, see what their thoughts are about placement, so we're not going to be competing with fire, police, and DPS, and see if we could perhaps go for 1/10 of a mill for maybe 4 years or 5 years, and that millage would be labeled, my thought is, for maintenance, trail building, and or acquisition, so that it covers 3 different areas. Currently, we are limited to maintenance for $168,000. We can't transfer maintenance funds to any kind of acquisition because that's not what the millage allowed for. Secondly, if we run out of maintenance for whatever reason, we don't have a lot of money in acquisition, and we can't use that anyway for maintenance. So the issue is that we have a limited amount of money for acquisition and probably about 3 years for maintenance. And if we were to find a date in the next 12 months, as an example, 14 months, with the presidential election cycle coming up, we have an ability to time this so that we would not run out of maintenance funds, and we would have new funds for acquisition as necessary. And I would ask that this body consider that, and let's take a look at, and I'm throwing out 1/10 of a mill because that seems to be about the minimum that would do us any good, and 1/10 of a mill would provide $70,000 a year, and that would cover over a period of 5 years, as an example, $350,000, give or take a little bit, and that would keep us healthy for a much longer period of time. And I'd welcome thoughts from anybody else. So it would be the 2 things. It would be the 1/10 of a mill over 5 years, and then looking at the purpose to allow for acquisition, maintenance, and trail construction as well.
Thank you. Residents, I think, need to be aware, too, is that when the township first established the Greenways Open Space Committee, and the citizens voted for 2 different millages, one for acquisition of property and one for the maintenance of property, is that both of those millages have fallen off. I want to say as early as like 2019. So they have not been assessed on your tax bills at all for since, for 4 years for sure. Okay, and again, it was a fund that was at least established, and then after that time, and it's been used over the course of time, it's not continually refurbished in that regard. And it's and again, if we take a look at our budgeting process over the course of several years, okay, we generally have been very fiscally conservative, and I would like to consider as very good stewards of our township tax dollars. So much so that I think when, in 2021-22, we had a budget of, for all of our projects that we did, of like $50,000. We're also now looking at trying to manage the monies that we have for 23-24, and we've reduced that, to, a more manageable amount too, under 40,000. So we're at least trying to manage and still provide the services for residents that certainly that they want. Any questions or any other concerns about?
I was thinking that if we are looking down the road for some kind of a millage request in that, is that as part of our, I guess go back to the term education or selling point of it, is also lay out some of the projects or ideas we have for either expanding the, potential utilization or what we might be able to do additionally out there, and say, okay, these, with these funds, we can go beyond, basically tree trimming, things like that. I think like
Right.
3/4 of our expenses last year were cutting down trees, either removing from paths or, like I said, ones that were encroaching or could potentially damage property owners abutting that, to go beyond that will take some more monies if it is expanding trails or some things
Right.
we want to do out in the trails. So use that as, like I said, part of ways to sell a millage is,
Right.
okay, this is what we expect to do beyond what we're doing right now.
One other consideration, and I agree with Mr. Geist completely. One other consideration is we have property at the north end of the island in what's commonly referred to as a wildlife preserve. There's a trail there that's approximately half mile, and at some point, we're going to have the land available. That's a north-south trail that runs parallel to the canal between Thoroughfare and the canal, north of Horsemill. We're also going to be in a position, given the amount of open space and hopefully with some help from the Conservancy with some of their properties, where we could do an east-west trail from Meridian through the newly acquired properties over to Thoroughfare and link up with that trail as well. And that would service people on the north end of the island, allowing them someplace where they could get out and stretch their legs, walk their dogs, and
Ride their bikes.
use that kind of stuff. And we also have some limited areas north of that. We've examined the inventory of our property. We have certainly the former Manchester Woods, south of Manchester, and that runs between Manchester and I think the best way to describe it would be Rucker Road on the south end and the Meridian on East River on the end. We've done an awful lot of good work in there with trail maintenance and laying down a lot of wood chips there, but there's really nothing in the middle except that link between Gage and Ferry. And we have a little over 50 acres between Island and Ferry that is marked on the west end by the canal and on the east by the properties along East River. That 50 acres, right now, the only trail that we have in there is, in fact, the new trail that connects Ferry and Gage. That is a wonderful piece of property. I respect the idea that we have some areas on this island that should perhaps remain green, but as I've said before, I think it's also important to offer the citizens a better experience than that. And when I've been out to communities like Northville and some of the other areas there, there's an awful lot of interest in having access to the roads and access, whether it's by bicycle or just walking, people jogging, even bicyclists. That's a fabulous part of this community, a big part of this community, and I think that perhaps something in the center of the island, and then we've got also some area over along the canal across from Lowry where the Boy Scout project is looked at. These are all things that we do not have a lot of water access, public access to the water. We certainly have Sunrise Park at Parkway and East River, and we also have Water's Edge on the west side, but that is something that perhaps we could look at as a several-year project, would be putting in some kind of a loop trail there. And my guesstimate is that'd be about 3/4 of a mile. And I do know that there are some people that think that we ought to leave that just open and green and leave it as it is. And there's also other people that would support an idea of a trail in there. My theory is that deer don't vote, people do. And if we're going to have access, let's make it meaningful and part of what I, again, refer to as the Grosse Ile experience.
Anybody else or any other comments?
Yes, sir, I have a question. How much is left in the funding for open space?
Are we talking
For,
about maintenance or
acquisition?
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 For acquisition?
Acquisition is 20,000.
It's 20, Joe said that.
Mm-hmm, right.
Thanks. Excuse me. And I agree with what
Yeah.
Carol said about the request for, the 1/10 of a mil for 70,000 over 5 years. I think that would be reasonable and, would go over the community.
Well, I think one of the things that we probably as a group need to do, and we can, is that we probably should have like some sort of for lack of a better word, a get-together or at least a coming of the minds with the township supervisor and the township manager. And, maybe try to, look at the timing of this, also look at the wording of this. And I know that's a process in and of itself. So when you, and again, once we've established that, and, we establish a date, and we establish the wording, and we establish the amount that we're looking at, I believe it has to go to the state to be approved also, or at least the language has to.
Yeah, the language, the process is the language would be submitted to the township attorney, and she would then draft the language. It would be approved by the township board and then placed with Wayne County for a ballot question
Right.
locally here. So it's a three-step process. One, get the language drafted so that it is clear from a legal standpoint, and then take it to the board and ask the board to approve it. And then it goes on the ballot and ask the township voters to approve it. Pretty straightforward process, though.
Good. We should probably have that conversation soon. So I will initiate. Is that the pleasure of the board? You think that we should move on this sooner than later, right?
I can start that with the meeting, that regular Thursday meeting I have with the supervisor and with the manager, and just start getting an idea as to when would be good, and then come back to the next meeting with their thoughts. And again, I would like to avoid having a direct competition, if you will, with police, fire, and DPS, because those are health and safety. This is fun.
Yes.
And it's recreation, but at the end of the day, I don't think it is prudent for us to start competing with things that are
No.
much more important to the community. And I believe that is something that we should be cognizant of, and we always have. And one last thought is that there has been an awful lot of good consensus building within this group as to what properties that we think we should be looking at, what we should purchase. I look at the two properties that are on Meridian, and the one that was on Island Boulevard, and we passed on Island Boulevard because the consensus was not the right price and not the biggest bang for our money that we wanted, and we had another competing interest on that. So I would think that those are some very good decisions that were made, and it's not like we are throwing money at projects. Recognize there's a limited amount of funds, and I'm very pleased to have been a part of this body for the last 3 years and the work that's been done.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
You know, I would just throw out there one last thing, consider looking at something in 2025, because that is the year that the judgment bond
I was looking at that
expires, and
too.
that's a little over $1 million, so that'll be a fairly significant drop come that year, and to ask for a small amount might be good timing to target our efforts to put together a plan for that.
To follow up on that point, Mr. Geist, you have a future in financial analysis and accounting, sir. In 2024, in the next year and a half, 2 years, the sewer judgment bond will be falling off because that will have been satisfied. So you will have millage that will drop from that. You will also have millage that will drop from the Water's Edge mortgage that has been paid off. And when you look at those two things, even with the new road millage, that the taxpayers in the end of 2025, middle of 2025, will actually pay less, and this includes consideration of the road millage, but they're going to be paying less than they are right now on a total millage consideration. When you look at that, I think that that gives a lot of breathing room, and that's even with the new road millage that's gone out there. And roads are certainly being worked on, bridges are being worked on, and in 2 years, there's going to be a lesser burden, and we're going to have better infrastructure. And there was also some work that was done at the sewage treatment plant. And this is really pretty exciting stuff. And when you look at the millages that are going down, I'm not suggesting that we need to fill up the bucket again, but I do believe that it is a good time to recognize that there's been a lot of good work, a lot of accomplishments, and let's kick it up a notch with open space.
Good. Thank you. Okay. Anything else on our village? But yes, so Carl, if you would begin that process, that would be great.
I'm going to let the supervisor know he's going to be negotiating with Bill Stevenson
That's
again.
quite all right. That's fine. I look forward to it.
I'm sure he does too.
Okay, that's good. Yeah, I know. Oh, yes, very much so. I know. Our next discussion item is one on the GROSSE School Liaison. And, we were at least faced with a dilemma in terms of one of our new GROSSE Schools Liaison has transferred to another school. She's transferred, and I can let you speak to it if you'd like. And then we want to talk a little bit about how are we going to move forward. So Zoe, why don't you tell us a little about, or at least you don't have to tell us the whole story about why you transferred, but just like maybe what's happening, what's going right now.
So I transferred a couple weeks ago due to some social issues at GROSSE that weren't being addressed. It was a hard move for me because I've gone to GROSSE since 3rd grade, but I do think it was necessary for my peace of mind. So I'm hoping that I don't have those issues.
Yeah, very much so. And you're still a resident of GROSSE.
I am.
Yeah, and your family is, of course. Okay. I guess our dilemma is and we're not adverse, and we have had this before. We generally have had, in many instances in the past, we've had 2 school liaisons. Only because how busy high school students are in general, and so a lot of times they would alternate. And we've all been on this committee, and I think Bert, you remember that too, where we did have 2 and they alternated fairly well. I'm not adverse to, just because you go to a school off island, there are students, and that's a question to be asked, okay, there are students from Grosseille that go to Gabriel Richard that also are ecologically minded or have a sense of Greenways open space mission, that, how to help. And so I'm not adverse to saying, you should stay. I mean, that's one of the discussion points. However, we also know that one of the things we're trying to do is we're trying to engage Grosseille schools more. As a matter of fact, it's one of our goals for 23, 24. So, and it's kind of difficult from your standpoint that if you're going to Richard, I'm not saying it can't be done, okay, but that you could, how do you manage that? And you don't need to manage that. So I would like to propose that we obviously reach out to the schools, and they could provide hopefully they can provide a Grosseille schools liaison, and you can continue to serve as a student liaison, okay? Because the other thing is, I think we all need to be aware of is that, just because we live on a little island doesn't mean that the issues and the concerns are only ours, okay? Because it's, we're much bigger than that. We live in an area here, downriver, we live in southeastern Michigan state, and so we need to really start looking not only just here, in our own little island, but also globally in terms of how do these things impact. And I think that's something that, that because of your talents and your desire to serve on this committee in the first place, okay, that's one of the reasons why we interviewed you and this board approved you to do so. So as long as you continue to do, show up to the meetings and contribute as you have, then I don't have a problem with that. So
I would simply add to that, Ms. Loveday, I haven't had a chance to get to know you as well as I do a number of other people, and I'm sorry to hear that you're having a transfer, and I sincerely wish that there was other reasons for that. But I believe that it is very, very important that we reach out to other groups that have an opportunity to give us feedback. As Bill said, we're an island here, and sometimes that's taken in more than one fashion. Other communities have faced similar Greenways open space issues, and how they address it and how their schools address it, I think might be a valuable and instructive lesson for all of us. And if possible, I would encourage you to remain and come in here and give all these old people some kind of an idea that we can kick it up and do some more and do some better things. You may find things at Gabriel Richard or elsewhere downriver, and depending upon how your travels take you, that you could bring back to this and say, hey, I've got some ideas from some experiences that I've had, and that would be very valuable. I don't believe it should be just limited necessarily to a hometown group. I think we ought to have people out there that can come back and say, hey, I was traveling, I was vacationing, or this is what they do differently in Riverview and what Gabriel Richard does. So I would encourage you, if possible, to stay and continue to be a very helpful and big part of this group, because your insight is something that we don't have. And I would really hope that you'd be able to do that.
anyone else?
You could also help Mr. Geist run some of the track and field that he does too out there.
Good. Good. So, yes, so you are more than welcome to stay, and we want you to stay. And what we will do is I will reach out tomorrow to the, I should ask this question. Does Richard have any kind of environmental awareness class or any, or club or organization that would be?
I'm not really aware of many of the clubs. I know that if it is, it's not like very major, but I think kids at Gabriel Richard are in general more willing to help out the community.
Sure, okay. perhaps you could start your own club there or start it there. So, I mean, if you're able to do it here, you certainly can, it works both ways. You can bring those experiences you have here positively to over there and, and be involved. So I will reach out to Dr. Carter, the new principal, tomorrow and make a connection with, I think Ms. Gowie is still the environmental awareness advisor at the schools, and we'll see what we can do. Okay, good. Okay, thank you. Next on our, at least for discussion, is our Eagle Scout project. And I was able to meet with the parents of Enzo Bonamo, who was a 9th grade student who is making a proposal to do a pathway from the part of the cutout on Meridian where the Thoroughfare Canal Bridge is, and trying to get access to that bridge area, or at least to get access to the water from that area. I had the pleasure of sitting with them, and one of the steps of the process is that he has to get people to sign off. He has to get a scoutmaster. He has to get his own parents to sign off. We sign off and that, and basically it's a question of and again, if he's working on an Eagle Scout project and he's a 9th grader, he has time in order to complete the task. We would like to, and basically what the task would involve laying gravel down, laying wood chips down, making an access point to the canal, the Thoroughfare Canal, and work on some sort of perhaps a floating dock or something that can be removed, or making improvements on the beach area that is there. So, Carl, you want to add anything to that, or you have any other than?
No, I'm just excited that he's willing to take on this project, and I don't think it'll be an issue for this group to help him and approve it. It's going to be an awful lot of work that he's going to have to pull permits for, depending upon the scope of the project. I've already introduced him to the community development, formerly building department. He has met the people there, and they're familiar with him and what he's going to, what he wants to do. I'm certainly looking at permits, perhaps not just from the township, but from maybe the Army Corps and certainly Eagle.
Cool.
And used to be Michigan DNR, so because it is attached to a navigable body of water, we're going to have to do that, and Eagle is going to be involved because that is part of the Michigan waterway system. So he's going to be busy.
Yep.
Are we expecting him to make a presentation to us or some group?
Yes,
what
he
it
was,
is?
actually,
Good.
I wanted to, he had to get all the other signatures before he had the final documentation. So I wanted to have that presented to you this evening, but we'll probably do it at our November meeting. So his completed proposal will be at that point in time. And so we will ask him to make a presentation at that time too. Okay. One of the things we talked about at our last meeting, and I know this is something with we're looking at, is that some of the properties that we have acquired in terms of open space, and we've identified with those great, Grosville open space signs, and we generally have the date when they were put into the open space program. Some of those are in somewhat disrepair, or they're faded, or they need to be replaced in that. So one of the tasks, I guess, what we want to do is to look in your neighborhood, or we're going to, between now and November, and between now and maybe when the snow flies, and when it's 83 degrees on a October day, that's kind of like, you think that's far off, but I think it may be here sooner than we think. But one of the maybe tasks, and this is just, we need to maybe identify areas that in your designated wooded area that you're responsible to steward, to look at those in your areas and see, okay, what condition are they, and maybe get out there and let's maybe try to clean them up, is what I'm trying to say. So, does everybody have at least some idea of like what they're, and we know we have some new members on the board, where their areas are that are designated area? Zoe, you're new. What?
I'm not sure where I am these days.
Okay. Amanda, have you been assigned, no, you have not. Mr. Geist and I generally have the Meridian Woods.
I'd have to go back into some of the,
Carl, I think you're
Old
responsible
meetings.
for Ferry Gauge Trail. We were trying to, it's been closed, but I think there may be some possibility. Another area that we have that is open space is right behind the Playscape.
I think I used to have that.
I think you did. But now it's been kind of out of operation. But I think just because the pathways are closed, I think you can still take a look at that area, maybe walk through or drive by or whatever, and take a look at the signs. And it may be, the idea here is there may only be 2 or 3 signs, but if you take that great guide that you helped prepare, you and Cliff are working on, the guide to natural areas of GROSSE, it's identified like where that's be the case. Mandy, why don't you and Zoe, why don't you work on the bird sanctuary area, that area off of, that's closer to your home. Is that fair enough? Yes, Horse Mill and Thoroughfare area, then that, and even the newly acquired property.
One quick thought about the playscape is that the Township Board at its last meeting approved demolition contract for the playscape that was originally supposed to last for 20 years behind the post office.
Right.
Township offices at that time, and the materials are dated. There is some issues with bees and some of the other problems that are endemic to a 30-plus year playscape, and that contract was approved, and I would anticipate demolition. So when you go back there, there's going to be a trail that goes from behind the post office that generally westerly to Public Safety Building. The trail that is going from the parking lot to the playscape is most likely going to be covered over with dirt and seeded. So we're going to have limited trail there, and one option might be to push a trail out to Meridian so that you have access from Sunnybrook and some of the other streets in that part of Little Parkway and in that area, Dallas Court and that. But again, I think that's a future consideration, but right now that trail is going to be significantly cut back.
Carl, there was a question from the Conservancy Board meeting about that trail, because isn't it close to the new resource center, that trail?
I'm sorry, close to the,
The Conservancy's new resource center, because it's,
yes,
the
yes.
playscape's just basically
Yeah.
2 properties over.
they had concerns that the trail wasn't being maintained, and what was the issue with it?
The trail portion that goes from the southwest portion of the post office property, there's that access road that goes behind there, and then there's a small parking lot. The demolition would be from that parking lot going east and to the actual playscape.
Towards the river.
Okay, so east of the current post office,
Correct.
to where the empty bank is,
That would be,
that's where the demolition is going to be?
yeah, the demolition is behind the very east end of the post office, as well as pretty much where the bank is, where the new Conservancy offices are going to be,
Right.
the Resource Center.
Okay, so, and did you say that the trail that's there now, after the demolition, is going to be covered up?
No,
My understanding is that the playscape Once it has been demolished, will be covered with dirt, and then will be seeded, is what I remember in the.
Yeah, the playscape area, the trail is ours, and the trail is, and the only reason it's been closed is that the playscape was like condemned, so we didn't want people going back into the playscape area and then going on the trail, because, there might be an issue of, there could be liability, or it could be people getting hurt, so.
Is the trail being maintained?
No, it's been closed it's probably been closed for almost close to a year, I
Yeah,
would
ever
say.
since they condemned the.
Ever since they condemned the,
they closed it.
right, so the trail, because the trailhead is in the middle of the playscape. It starts at the playscape. So you can't go through a condemned area to get to the trail, so the trail's been closed.
And I think to Amanda's point, I've heard some discussions at the Land Conservancy from their new resource center would like to look into a potential path from the back of their property that ties into that path.
Yes.
But until the playscape area has been remediated, and that's going to have to stay
Yeah.
on hold.
The meeting I had in the spring with Paul Glure, who at the time, I know, is he still the president? Okay, I mean, he had mentioned that he was aware that the playscape had been condemned, and he wanted to, and they were refurbishing the property that is their current building, and they want to be able to take a trail that connects to ours. And I think we would entertain that at this committee, so.
Okay, thanks
And-
for the update.
So anything else? So just, between now and November, maybe our November meeting, let's get out there and at least try to, as the cold weather, kills off some of the mosquitoes, and you're able to access that better. Let's go out and check out the signs, and let's talk and see what we can do. I'll probably send an electronic version of, hey, okay, where we're at, what about the status? I mean, some are in good shape, some are in pretty bad shape.
It might be helpful to have people take pictures and then
Yes.
consolidate like a PowerPoint or something.
Mm-hmm. No, I hear you. Oh, absolutely. No, that's a very good idea. Okay, I also know that somewhere along the line, we should maybe have a big get-together, okay, and I'm not averse to having not just the leadership, but this entire group of leaders that we have here meet with our Greenways Open Space, the Bicycle Pedestrian Committee, and the Grosse Ile Nature and Land Conservancy. I think that would be an interesting kind of a confab if we can get everybody together on that to discuss, because we do have some common goals, and we do share, in terms of, with sometimes, many times limited resources, you want to do, get your biggest bang for your buck, and if we can work together on these things, or try to make decisions that are data driven and, meaningful decisions in that regard, I think that's helpful.
I think there is a community of interest, and we talked about just, my recommendation is set a date, and whoever can make it,
Yes,
makes it,
right.
as opposed to try and accommodate so many people that nothing ever gets done.
Right.
And the idea of being able to have three groups with a community of interest, something as simple as you look at the bicycle path extension that's going in from Grow Road down to Nature and Land Conservancy, International Wildlife, and then just a little bit north of that, we have all the acreage from former Manchester Woods. There's got to be some kind of projects there that make sense for everybody to take a look at and get involved in, and other things as well. And my recommendation, set a date, and whoever can show does it, whether it's with the chairs or we invite everybody in each of the groups. I think that, and perhaps even some of the people involved with, like John Hardick's group, the people involved with the outdoors. And Bert, the players there very well. They have access to a lot of information. They also have access. John helped me securing the grant for the BPAC, the bicycle
Right.
addition that goes from Grow down there. And I think it's just a matter of simple respect to include people with that. Set a date if they can make it. We do this quarterly.
Right.
And then if we can do it in November and then come back again in maybe February, I think and then have it roll quarterly, we may find that we have some ability to do more. The sum total is greater than the individual parts.
Very good. Yes, I agree. Good. I'll get that ball rolling too, so we've got to get it going. So,
We may have to put an addition on these signs. This is Bill Stevenson chair.
no, it's quite all right. It's not just me. Okay, do we have any reports this evening? Okay, so I don't know. Carl, you have anything from the township?
I have
Oh, yeah,
nothing from the township board or the township manager or the supervisor.
But thank you for what you have given so far. Mandy, what's going on with the Grosse Nature and Land Conservancy?
Yes, I do have a report. The next event is Sunday, October 29th, down at the A&A that Carl just mentioned, where down the, on East River. It's not, yeah, the A&A, the airport natural area on East River. There's going to be a guided hike focused on the nature of Halloween, exploring myths and misunderstandings about our creepiest Michigan plants and animals. And it's from 1 to 2:30 on Sunday, the 29th of October. Next thing on the report is that the new Grosse Nature and Land Conservancy Resource Center that we just talked about by the old playscape is nearly completed. It's been on time and on budget. The landscaping work has been done. The site work, design, and plant procurement were completed by Beaufort Gardens and Landscaping. They specialize in naturalistic gardens. It was on the 22nd, 23rd of September that several volunteers planted hundreds of native plugs. And we need help to keep the new plants watered, which would be really great. And there's a link if anyone's interested for the sign up. We're going to have a great annual meeting in November. It's Saturday, November 4th at the Country Club on Bellevue. Doors open at 10 o'clock. Meeting starts at 10:30 till noon. The special guest is Dr. John Hartig, who will speak on the topic of saving the conservation crescent, which was the one of the main goals of the Conservancy when we started in 1993 to preserve the southern area of the islands around the island, and it was called the Conservation Crescent. I'm not describing it very well, but it's Stony Island down to the end of the island and around to Gibraltar. And everyone is welcome to come to the annual meeting. And with Dr. Hartig there, it should be really, really an interesting meeting. So please try to make it.
Good.
You should come.
Very much so. Good, thank you. We don't have anything from the Beautification Committee, although we're trying to keep our island beautiful. I do know that Cliff St. Pierre, who isn't with us this evening, made a very astute observation in terms of when you take a look at, as he was driving around or he was going to dump the junk, he remarked about how as you go through the open space areas, that there is not a considerable amount of trash or debris that is evident. We know we still have issues with encroachment and things of that nature, where neighbors think that they own the open space and they don't, and they do debris, yard waste and things of that nature into the woods. But again, I just want to say that the island is beautiful and we want to maintain that as best as we can. And nobody's heard from Pam lately, have we?
I saw her on Sunday and mentioned that to this month's meeting was going to be today, so I passed the word along. to her and that, but I don't know what her plans were.
Okay, we need to reach out for Pam. And Pam, I know, was always looking for more people to join the beautification committee. And then Theresa isn't with us this evening, and we're looking at getting welcome letters out to new residents, which we generally do, okay? Anything else for the good of the cause on reports?
I have a couple of items, or at least one question, one item, is just to let everybody know that connector trail between Grow Road and the Gibraltar Bay Unit Airport Nature Area is now open
Oh, good.
and accessible to walkers and bikers. The other item or question I have is, we talked about this last month, but looking for a dawn to dusk ordinance of some type for the open space areas and that, and I believe we were looking for some guidance or direction from the township
Right.
itself. Has anything happened in that regard?
Other than, no, I spoke with Derek Thiel before our last meeting, and I think I mentioned it at that point in time. It seems like there's a number of ordinances that they are looking to, the township board is looking to revise, and it's not just the dawn to dusk but there's a whole series of them that either need to be updated or modified, or there are circumstances have changed, so they may need to be amended. And so we're on the list, okay? So it's on a list of a number of things. Carl, any?
Yeah, Mr. DeBose, Kyle is trustee on the board that has been very hardworking at trying to put some of these ordinances to the forefront and bring them in for a vote. There are, I believe, 4 other ordinances, and some of them have been very extensive, dealing with zoning and things like that. We also have a master plan that has been contracted out, so that we're looking at having update on the master plan, and I think that would be timely for the ordinances to be done as well then, so that we could take a look at that. There is some mixed feelings about dawn to dusk ordinance. There certainly is the issue of enforcement. We're not going to be sending out police officers looking for that, but on the other hand, if you don't have an ordinance, you can't enforce it. You can't do anything. So perhaps something is better than rampant enforcement, and that is, and I think the police and the community here by and large have been very good about warnings and shepherding offenders, young and old. It's also a health and safety issue, though, because if you have people out there riding bicycles, and they may have that helmet flashlight on, but if you come across a tree that's recent deadfall, or somebody has dropped something in the trail that causes you to flip on a bike, it's just not a very good idea to bicycle at night. A lot of bad things happen to people when they do that kind of stuff. I think we call them a Darwin Award, and we don't want to have any of those.
Pardon me, but as the discussion goes on about the township modifying a number of ordinances and that, is where does the open space allowed some kind of input or involvement in making sure that whatever modifications or ordinances are crafted adequately address our needs? I haven't heard any of that discussion.
Well,
Where do we fit in?
yeah, the ordinances haven't been drafted, but typically they would be posted for public comment, so that the public would have an opportunity to say, yeah, good idea, bad idea, and that would certainly include us. I will ask Derek for a progress, Derek Thiel, the township manager, for progress update, and maybe have something kicked back to this group so that we could have comment on that. I think that's a very timely matter, because there may be things that we're aware of that others are not. Some of the ordinances, and one of the ones that we just looked at, was kicked back, as an example, kicked back to the attorney, because it dealt with animals at large, as an example, dogs being probably the biggest example, where there was a provision in the recommended ordinance from the attorney that after 3 days, animals that are dogs that are unclaimed would be euthanized, and that was absolutely 100% contrary to what the Grosse-Ile Animal Shelter stands for, and that is a no-kill policy. So that was brought to the board. The board looked at it as an example and said, hey, we've got a problem here in that we don't believe in that, and that's not enough time, and unless the animal is sick or irretrievably injured, that's not what we do here. So it was kicked back. When we get that kind of a ordinance, and again, I'll talk to the manager tomorrow, but I think it should be reviewed by this group, and that is something that we have some expertise in that others, a lawyer can look at one thing from a liability standpoint. The rest of us are humans that look at it in terms of what is the real practical effect.
Yeah, I agree. I strongly believe that this committee should have some serious input or ability to review or assist in the crafting or drafting of any ordinance that pertains or is
Open
applied to
space.
open space before it goes out for public review, even in that regard.
Thank you. Correct me if I'm wrong, and perhaps maybe I don't know the inner workings of Township Board and their procedures, but many times when there are ordinance changes, are there not 3 separate readings of that? Or is that not a standard procedure when it comes to the proposal is introduced? I mean, there may be a whole series of them. Then it gets a second reading, and in between, there's a time period where you have public comment or a public, so a group or an individual can, did we come to the podium and make a statement? Hey, did we consider this? Did we consider this? And then, I'm just perhaps that's.
I'll make a special effort to have the township manager advise both yourself and me as the liaison when that ordinance is ready, and then let him know that we're going to review. We would like to review
Yes.
it, and I don't see where there would be an issue with having us review it and maybe comment on it. And again, I think there's a lot of talent here and a lot of expertise where we certainly have an idea what would make sense for the, as an example, dusk to dawn, curfew and those kinds of things. So I think that's just an excellent example, and the sooner we can accomplish that, the sooner we'll have some ability to protect the properties further and protect the people using them.
Good. Anybody else? Okay, this is our time period for public comment, and I know the buses are still circling the parking lot but there are plenty of empty seats. There are no public comments, limited to 3 minutes or less. I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
One final thought, if I may, Mr. Chair. It's premature to think about this perhaps in October, but historically we have arranged, instead of having a December meeting, we have had a luncheon. It's been at Smoky's for the last several years, and that would be for the holidays. And I would hope that we would be able to set a date, perhaps next meeting, and figure out when we can all sit down and just talk to each other, as opposed to having a meeting and doing something fun. And
Yes.
Zoe can come in and give us updates on Gabriel Richard, and we could just have some fun.
Good. Yes,
So I would ask that for the next meeting if we can.
absolutely. We'll set that. Is there a motion to adjourn at 8:19?
So moved.
So moved by Ms. Phillips, right?
Second.
Second by Mr. Bonnie. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. And I have the gavel. Thank you. Thank you.